I'm a big advocate of therapy or coaching to be fiercely real. Both people in the relationship have to be changed. We both have to give something of ourselves enough that it risks being seen.
Do you find that there is reluctance to allow that persona to drop in your presence?
Absolutely. There's a big risk to let go of this beautiful, shiny persona that has got us so far. But it's the only option when the pain and the fear creep in.
With all the high performers that you work with, the creatives and so forth, is there any kind of common pain that you see that runs through these people?
Yeah, I think many of them are driven by fear, not passion. At some point in their lives, they didn't feel enough. And so they're on this pursuit of, if I climb the ladder to the top, finally, I will feel worthy. And that, I think, is a recipe for disaster.
Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the podcast. And today I have with me a man who I've had the real pleasure of sitting down and speaking to for a number of hours. And after some really fascinating and insightful conversation, I felt like he'd be an absolutely perfect man to come on the podcast and talk about his experience in his work and also his life, because he's had quite a life's journey to get to the point where he is now. And we're probably going to dive in and talk about the sort of people that he works with and he guides through life in many ways, through difficult times and into prosperous times, and a combination of the two. Today we have with us David. How are you doing today, David?
I'm very good. Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to have this opportunity to extend the conversation we had on that night we met.
And for some context, listeners, we met at a event called Band of Brothers. It was for the opening of a new wellness space in London, and there's about 30 or so men from all sorts of Banquet for Brothers, not Band of Brothers, Banquet for Brothers. It's come back to me. We, opening of a wellness space, but we were invited by a guy called Adam, Floating Home Adam, I think he's on Instagram. And it was just men from all walks of life, coaches and therapists, and including people who were tattoo artists that I spoke to and people who own fitness and health and all sorts. But this thread that ran through every man was this commitment to like mental health, the importance of connection as well. So we did some really beautiful practices and had some amazing food, which we were talking about just before we jumped on, that we found so difficult to explain to the people in our lives how beautiful this food was. But there's enough about that. I'd like to dive into the episode. And I thought, David, I'll start by your experience. What was your journey that brought you to the work that you do now?
Yeah, I definitely didn't intend to do the work I do now. I was utterly in love with the music industry. So I started very young and got a record deal when I was 16 as an artist. Left, built a management company, built a digital agency, and was all about the business world, all about making money, all about ego. But a couple of things happened around the same kind of time. One is that although I was doing very well professionally, I was an alcoholic and an addict and just absolutely chaotic. I think the only thing that helped me was that part of my condition was being a workaholic. So I managed to, in very unhealthy ways, balance intense productivity with just chaos. So I got sober at 22 in a 12-step program. That fundamentally changed me. But at the same time, there was a young artist that we managed, and we signed him to a big record label. He was only 16, and his favorite artist was James Morrison. And by the time, about a year later, we got him on tour with James Morrison, he left halfway through because it was too intense. And what we do in the music industry is we take these children, we suddenly put them in boardrooms with a group of adults. We give them too much money without any guidance, and then put the world of responsibility on their shoulders, and they crumble. And then we let them go and we find another. So there was something I felt fundamentally broken in the system, not just human to human, but even in as much as sustainability and finance. We were just watching talent crash and burn. So all of this happening made me think there's actually something very exciting about the ability to change. I know that it's possible because I'm now 11 years sober, but I didn't drink or take a drug from the first day I went into a 12-step program. And also maybe there's something we can do in this organization or this industry to make things better. So then I left the music industry for a bit, trained for 4 or 5 years as a psychotherapist, and then came back and basically built a department within the management company that I'd founded. And from there, life has taken me all over the place, from the music industry to kind of corporate life to the influencer space, but always with this intention that change is possible and that if we're going to make a difference, we have to meet a person human to human. We have to be in amongst the messiness of it and not shield ourselves through professionalism and kind of clinical expertise. And I love it. I mean, it's a gift to do what I do now.
Mm. And is that something you see quite often? You mentioned there the kind of shield of professionalism and kind of clinical kind of being, like you said, like being in it with someone is what really supports them. And I imagine that inside, especially companies, I've worked in big corporate companies and everything, there's so much shielding from the real person through like, professionalism, like, we shouldn't ask those questions. That's not our responsibility. Is that something you see really commonly in with the people you work with or companies you work in?
Yeah, well, I think I meant that statement in a few ways. One is, especially now in big organizations, we play the game of vulnerability, hashtag mental health matters, but it's a complete fraud. It's not true. I've seen record labels talk strongly about their values of integrity and togetherness and then fire a whole team within a day's notice. I don't believe a yoga workshop for 2 hours on a Friday is enough. So I think organizations pretend to be very open to this stuff, but actually it's still a no-go area. You can't actually bring your pain. They just want to do the tick box exercise to say that they've been there. But I think I also meant the statement in terms of the world of therapy and coaching. Throughout my life, I was in therapy numerous times, and a lot of it was awful. I felt judged. I felt like someone was trying to analyze me. I felt restricted by the boundaries. I felt like I was getting something done to me. And so I'm a big advocate of therapy or coaching to be fiercely real, which means that we actually, both people in the relationship have to be changed. We both have to give something of ourselves enough that it risks being seen. And I think especially if we look at major artists or kind of very high performers, if you're not real with them, they know, right? You have to give something. It has to be true. Otherwise, they move on. You're just like everybody else. It's a very interesting space.
I'd love you to expand on that last bit you said there about like there's a desire, if they don't feel the real you, they just move on. I'd love to dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, let's say a high performer, whether that's in the music industry or otherwise, they know how to play the game. Corporate life is this interplay of different roles and masks. And you have your HR and you have your support. That is all, it's professionalism disguised as realness. And when high performers come in, for me, they're sizing me up. They're working if they can play me, right? If they can get the tick box exercise done, if they can do therapy without doing therapy. So the only way that we actually create change is I have to smash that. There has to be a sense of true vulnerability. And you can rest assured that that doesn't start with them, right? It starts with me. So how do I show up in such a real way that they begin to let go of their defenses? And the incredible thing is, I have people come and sit in my office, and for the first 2 sessions, it's a front. It's a beautifully crafted front. That's why they've got to where they've got to. But the moment we can crack that open, I see a person always is much more interesting, much more frightened, much more concerned with life and others. I think one of the problems with being very successful is part of the way we got there was by crafting a brilliant persona. And it works so well at the expense of authenticity. So it's a big risk to let go of this beautiful, shiny persona that has got us so far. But it's the only option when the pain and the fear creep in and become unavoidable. It's a bit like a game, I guess, of two humans trying to play hide and seek with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're with someone who has learned to play the game so well, like you described, they've learned to play the game, they've crafted this, like you said, beautiful persona that the world loves, and they get a lot of validation and plaudits for being. When they sit in front of somebody like yourself, they want to keep that. They want to keep that up, right? There's a part of them that wants to keep that intact, that keeps them safe. It's this, shell, this protective mask and mechanism. Do you find that there is reluctance to allow that mask to drop, allow that persona to drop in your presence?
Of course, but to call myself out on the bullshit, that's exactly what I'm fucking doing. Welcome to my persona, which is the psychotherapist that works with high performers, and I am highly skilled and trained, and I've done my homework and I know the theories. So I am giving you the absolute persona. If I wasn't, maybe I'd say, I actually am quite activated in the last few days. I've got an old wound that showed up that's making me really preoccupied with something in my relationship, and it hurts, and I feel quite insecure in moments. But that doesn't align, because I'm the expert here. So it just then is an example of, like, can we risk shattering the illusion that we've created in the hope that maybe that will bring something up in you, and you're like, oh, okay, I kind of get it a bit more now, or I relate to that. But it's risky. So I'm practicing here now what I guess I fucking preach. There's always a risk because it exposes us. And whether the strategy that you use is to be the good guy, the over-functioning kind of nice guy, or whether you use a poor attempt of power and manipulation, I mean, it's all protecting the same small child inside of us, right? It's just what strategy worked at the time. What strategy do you use?
I use a strategy of, like, everything's cool. I'm happy. Everything in life's good with me. I even find myself, when my clients get on, it's so automatic, right? Someone's like, how are you? And you're like, oh, I'm good. And I sit in, and there's a moment I realize I'm like, no, that was a lie. I'm not good. I'm just saying that because I'm so trained to answer that question. I don't want you as my client to me to come in and go, actually, I feel fucking terrible. Actually, like, I feel a bit all over the place and I feel slightly ill prepared for this session and so forth. I don't want to put that on them. That's the underneath that is just like, oh, I don't want to put that on them. And then I do catch myself sometimes in that and being like, oh, actually, no, even before we jumped on, I said, you asked me how I was, and I was like, oh man, I'm feeling all these emotions because a friend of mine just called me and said his wife has gone into labor, because that's what was really true for me. And then even underneath that, there's like some more, but what I observed in myself was that entered us into a much more real conversation about our experience of childbirth, right? If I just started and gone like, yeah, I'm good, sorry I was late, that whole thread can't happen. That depth of experience, that depth of conversation can't really happen in there. And I guess what I'm thinking back to is a lot, like you said, a lot of the therapy that I had and have been in is like therapist, client, therapist. You could be with the therapist for 4 months and realize that you basically absolutely nothing about this person bar their name and maybe some very surface level details about their lives. And as you're talking, it's making me think of like how much more people could be served if we could drop that professionalism or that kind of mask in the coaching therapy space, where we actually allow ourselves to bring more of us and trust that the people we're working with don't feel the need to mollycoddle us in those moments, and we can both just be real together.
Yeah, and there's always a subtlety, right? Like, I think a therapist can offer a lot to a client of themselves without ever telling them whether they have kids or whether they're married, just by the way they're impacted and the congruence of it all. But I think if we look at kind of recovery meetings and kind of 12-step work and that side of things, shared experience is really powerful. The type of therapy I'm trained in is called existential psychotherapy. And they have this idea of existential touchstones, which is to offer just enough that feels relevant, not to offer an unprocessed pain spot but to allow a person to know that you are real. Have you watched Good Will Hunting?
Yeah, many years ago. Many,
Okay.
many years ago.
Watch it again, because Robin Williams is both the most unethical therapist and the best therapist I've ever known, because he is so moved to be real. And the whole storyline is this guy goes through so many therapists and he's so clever with his defenses that he rattles them or pushes them away, but he can't do it with Robin Williams because Robin Williams is not holding a front. There's nothing to attack or break down. And in that becomes this ability to actually be met by another person. I love it. I watch it every couple of months just to remind myself of where I want to be as a therapist. Brilliant movie.
God, yeah, I haven't seen it for ages. I would have been, a mere early 20s man without the depth of understanding of these sorts of things that I possess now.
Yeah, it's masterful.
Kristen, I'm pondering as you're speaking, and so it takes us a slightly different direction, is like, with all the kind of high performers that you work with, the creatives and so forth, is there any kind of common pain that you see that runs through these people that commonly comes up in their experience of life?
Yeah, I think many of them are driven by fear, not passion. At some point in their lives, they didn't feel enough or didn't feel connected or didn't feel worthy as they are. And so they're on this pursuit of, if I climb the ladder to the top, finally, I will feel worthy. But the flip side of that is what they find is they climb the ladder to the top and there's nothing fucking there, ever. Then we get to a point, and I work a lot with people at this stage, where they've sold the business, they've made the money, they've had the number one, and they're fucking miserable because it turns to kind of an existential pain of, well, what's this all about? Yeah, it's fear and it's inadequacy that, although not sustainable, are brilliant driving forces. They can really push us to go far. Even think about this idea of celebrity. Now, this isn't a judgment. This is just a kind of reflection. There's something interesting in the psyche that is so determined to be known by a large amount of people, to finally be acknowledged. That says something. And the tragedy of that is you're never actually known, because somewhere along the line you create your artistry and you build a brand. And so what's loved and adored is something that isn't you in the first place. So you feel this even bigger gap between who I actually am and what people adore. So the long-winded way is to say fear, right, and inadequacy, like all of us.
And what you were saying there about the kind of gap there, this celebrity wanting to be known, wanting to be seen, this deep desire to be seen by many and to be seen as somebody, somebody worth seeing, I guess, also. And that it's this kind of self-perpetuating, isn't it? Because there's a desire to be seen, but the more the desire to be seen is kind of like given energy, the more the gap starts to kind of become between the authentic self and who they really are and who they would really love us to see. Right? Though there'd be fear wrapped around that. And the person that's like out in the world, that's polished, that people do adore. And I imagine that creates, like you said, that gap. It must create an even deeper wound of wanting to be seen and to some degree, even deeper experience of like loneliness and not being known.
Yeah, a complete incongruence. And the same thing happens in the influencer space. Because not so much anymore, but if we look at how the influencer world began, it was usually people that weren't out socializing with friends because they didn't have that many friends. It was that they were the more kind of computer kids, maybe let's say geeky if we're going to use that term, and suddenly they're adored. So you've got this huge change of I wasn't popular and now I'm more popular than I could ever imagine. And I think that's why we get a lot of the drinking or the drugs or the kind of tragic sexual behavior. It's like because this wound just it doesn't know what to do with a massive following and admiration all of a sudden when it's felt so lonely its whole life. So yes, I think the feeling of loneliness just expands. But the only thing I'd say is there's a flip side. And when someone builds a creative life as a musician or an influencer from something they're passionate about, when they write music, because they can't not write music, because they have something to say and the pain, that's where it's beautiful. And these people normally are pissed off with fame, right? They wish there could be a way to deliver that art without the celebrity culture. I was watching something with Ben Affleck the other day, and he was saying, because I think he directed or was very much involved and acted in Good Will Hunting when he was very young, which was an incredible feat. So he was saying that he loves acting, he loves directing, but the celebrity side of things is so suffocating for him. So that's a good example of someone that is based actually in truth that then gets pulled in. But when we look at the culture today with everyone trying to be TikTok famous, the goal is not to create the best piece of music possible or to deliver the best message. It's to get famous. It's simply to build an audience to be adored. And that, I think, is a recipe for disaster.
Because it's that the motivation is still, as a term that I think Chris Williamson used in the podcast, of dark motivation. The fear, pain, wanting to run away from the wound versus kind of, I think, what might be termed as a light motivation that's like love, passion, meaning and purpose, and how those burn very differently. The dark motivation like can burn us out very quickly and very harshly because of the running away aspect or the continual reliving of the wound as well. I see with people like constantly in the wound is energetically exhausting versus the passion and the love almost being something that feeds and cycles and increases energy, increases like motivation, energy, and vitality even. Is that something you also see inside of your work?
Yes, absolutely. But that dark, what did you call it? Dark motivation. Yeah. That can get us to CEO level. It really can. It can get us to be an Olympic athlete. But it never allows us to reach the destination that we've been promised. And that kind of lighter motivation is almost like overflowing of I need to offer something to the world because it's so alive in me. It's more sustaining, it's more captivating, and you feel it when you're in the presence of someone like that. Your nervous system just picks up presence that is not there when I sit with a tired CEO that we find out is still trying to impress his dad from childhood. There is, not to go too much on a tangent, but when I work with high performers, I often use this concept called vertical development that comes out of Harvard and looks at how we move through developmental stages in adulthood, just like we do as children. And you look at kind of conventional ways of thinking, which gets us to the achiever stage, which is we're very good at reaching goals, we can collaborate, and we have a good sense of drive. But after that, you have to go through this redefining stage of questioning, what the fuck is all this about? Where am I going? And then you increase up to kind of the top levels. And these are the kind of CEOs that you sit down with. And even though you know they have insanely busy diaries, they have all the time in the world for you. They have a playfulness about it. They have a way of understanding what they do is both important and transient. It's not connected to their self-worth. They're just enjoying the experience as it happens. And I guess that would be in a way looking at light motivation, right? And it feels so different when you sit with these people. It's inspiring. You feel special in their presence. You don't feel rushed. You don't feel restricted. You don't even feel like you need to impress them. And their power is very quiet. It's very gentle. They don't shout. They don't need to. They just flow. I've only met a few of them in my life, but it feels like a beautiful place to be.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Mm.
I can almost, as you're describing it, it's like intoxicating to be in the presence of someone like that. You know, you just wanted, it almost impacts you in a way that's like, oh man, I can relax. Or even you feel aspects of yourself being mirrored to you that maybe you never noticed before, or felt uncomfortable with acknowledging.
Yeah. Well, I think it breaks this idea that for a man, we have to be powerful in some kind of dominant way. I think the opposite of dominant power is not passive and weak. It's this kind of collaborative power. It's actually feeling so powerful in your system, so grounded, so true, so authentic, that why do you have to perform at all? You're just comfortable. There's a record label boss. I won't mention his name, but he is this type of character to me. And it was very small moments. Like he came to have a conversation with me when I couldn't offer him anything. And he spent 3 hours chatting. He got a cup of coffee and he was so polite to the person. He then brought it up to the rooftop and then he was like, oh, I'm going to bring it back down again so they don't have to come up and get it. Like these small little moments of calm and peace. But this man runs a company with hundreds of employees. But he does so with grace and compassion. He's not weak, he's not conflict avoidant, but he just isn't trying to prove anything or get somewhere to escape fear. He just loves what he does, and that is inspiring.
When you describe these individuals, as I hear this, it's like it's the meaning of what they do, right? The meaning they place on what they do. The meaning isn't like I'm building this massive company so that the world thinks I'm amazing. As though we're kind of circling what we said before, or that people think I'm worthy, or people think I'm good enough. It's like, and I guess the question for you is what do you see as, and we might have touched on it already, but what do you see as the meaning for people like this record label boss, the meaning that they attach to their work and what they're doing, if there is any?
I think they're very passionate about what they do, and they get a lot of enjoyment, and they know they're good at what they do. And their motivating force is to use their gift in some way to push things forward or make things better or enable creativity to blossom in other individuals. There's like a service aspect to it. It's not about them. They're genuinely excited about an artist's potential to deliver something to the world that the world needs. They're less concerned about the amount of money in the bank because of it. And that makes them very special individuals. So there's something, they know their worth, they're driven by passion, and they're focused on something bigger than themselves. And counteract that with someone that is still trying to prove themselves, that is driven by fear and concerned mainly about how whatever they're doing comes across or appears to others. So I feel even as I talk about it, one way makes me relax and feel spacious. The other feels restrictive and tight and aggressive. Does that make sense? That was a bit of a roundabout answer for you.
No. It makes complete sense. Like you said, as you described this, as we talked about these two opposite ends of a spectrum, I imagine it's more end of a spectrum. There's the person who is centered on me. It's about them. Everything revolves around them. What they're doing is for them and for their worth and their value and their image. And the other person is, on the other end, is like, it's not about them. It's like, it's about everyone else. Like, how can I be in service to the world? How can I use my gifts to bring more of other people's gifts into this world, to evolve us in a way that in whatever way that feels, some might call it spirit, some people might call it God, that is moving through me to deliver as a kind of clear channel to allow the best of, or what is needed in the world, to come into the world as a clear channel to do that. Whereas the person who is maybe more I-centered, again, there's no channel. They're actually very blocked. And I imagine you probably experienced this. They're very blocked individuals because everything is focused on them, their accomplishments, their perception, or the way they're perceived. And their world must feel then, not just they feel aggressive, they probably also then feel the world is aggressive towards them as well, I wonder.
I think absolutely. Two things you said there. One, I think the high performance or any type of development process like this is fundamentally spiritual. It doesn't mean we have to be theist and believe in God, but there is something that transcends the personal when we get into this realm. I feel that in my therapy work. Sometimes I show up in a very human way and I'm doing the work, and sometimes something much bigger than me takes over. But the other thought I had was that, in a way, we're talking about this like they're two different people. But that's not quite true, because the person that is the free, spacious, service-orientated person, that fear-restricted part is still there, like in all of us. It's not a case of we shed that skin. It's that we are better able to notice it without getting hijacked by it. It's there, and it's probably kind of like the record label boss. He will have the desire to be selfish. He will have the fear that makes him want to show up and be on the front cover of a magazine and make everyone see how well he's doing. But he has made a conscious decision as much as he can to be driven and guided by his values and his truth, and not the fear. And I think we do that on a moment-to-moment basis. I know I do, right? There's always this other side of me that wants something. There's always a side of me that's scared. It's just I try not to feed it as much as the other one.
Yeah, it's a beautiful distinction. It also removes us from this very black and white way that sometimes we view people, like that person's good, that person's bad. It's and as you're saying this, it makes me think that it's, like you said, it's much less about people being completely in service of the world versus completely selfish, and more a case of like someone could have started out, very service orientated, like I'm doing this to make the world a better place. I think of politicians. I worked in Brussels for a long time, for about a year, a long time ago, and met some really idealistic people who were going into politics and very much in the service, like let's make the world a better place. But I also met some people who'd been in politics for a very long time, who'd lived in Brussels and lived in the European kind of community there, who'd become incredibly cynical. And you could meet the same person on the same night sometimes. And I guess why I mentioned that is someone could come in to the world of music, the world of business, and like, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to support everyone coming through. And then as they go through this journey, that part of them that's fearful, that part of them that is concerned with other people's opinions starts to grow and maybe take over more time and energy and space. And then they start to lose that initial why, right? That initial why they got into what they're doing, that initial spark that was about service. And I guess I imagine that you might come across people that find themselves in that particular juncture of lostness, or of no longer being, say, connected to the deeper why. And I guess the question is both, how does that come about? And what is the kind of exit point coming back to? How does someone kind of come back to their deeper why and meaning and service if they've got lost in the kind of, I feel like I'm using religious terms, like lost in the world, but like lost in the ego and the fear and the worries?
Yeah, so of course, I think most people that come to my office are in that space. I think I'm in that space, continuously. I think this is not a one-time change. I think it's so intoxicating to get power or feel good that it can hijack. But like you said, what happens is an emptiness that at some point or other we can't escape. And that's usually when maybe people come into the office. Maybe they've noticed it, but maybe it's their partner that feels like they've been lost, or maybe it's something's missing in their life and they're feeling sad whenever there's not plans. I think how we get through that is through fierce compassion, through this idea of speaking truth. Let's think about that in practice. Someone comes into my office, and for the first couple of sessions, we're going over the persona, right? And then there's a little hint of vulnerability, but there's not too much, and that's fine, that's cool. And they guard their self-image and their self-concept so tightly because it's so connected with approval and acceptance. But as our space deepens and they start to trust me more, other experiences that they don't really want to own themselves begin to show up. And that's where truth begins to trickle out. It's like maybe someone starts with, it's just so stressful at the moment. I just really want to, I need to get myself back in order. Maybe if you can give me some practical tips. And then session 6, I hear, but I'm really scared, my wife says that she wants me to connect more. And I say I can't because I'm busy, but actually I don't know how to. And I think that if I didn't make this money, then maybe she would leave. And I kind of feel lonely. Like I say, I'm too busy for seeing friends, but actually the other day I tried to reach out and no one even got back to me. And I don't know what to do about that. Okay, so now we see truth. We've got a relationship problem and we've got a friendship problem. So now we can work on that. Let's actually explore what's happening in the relationship. Let's learn what it means to connect with our partner. What do we want for our friendships? Are we doing some? And then so we drop down to truth, and then we deal with truth, and then we can explore how to actually create change in that space. And then 6 months down the line, the relationship with the partner is better. The person maybe has a few more friends. They realize that they can sit with themselves for a bit more. They've learned a bit more about, actually, they think they work so hard because they still haven't quite got over the way their dad treated them when they were young. And they're starting to make peace with that. And so I hope that gives an insight of like how it just trickles. And I'm sure I'd love to hear, does that feel different to the experience that you have working with people, or is there some similarities?
Mm. Yeah. People usually come to me in crisis. It's a crisis point. It's usually people arrive to me. So there's breakups. One of the most common, probably 78% of my clients come to me, there's a breakup or breakup looming in relationship. And we usually start with the kind of surface level stuff. Like you said, I'm feeling worried about this. I feel stressed about this thing. Usually it starts with, I need to do different. I need to do differently. And through, I kind of call it cycling a conversation, because you're just having a conversation. They're saying some things. I'm asking some questions. I'm probably reflecting some things back. Do you realize when you talked about this thing, your body changed, your face changed, you looked like you took a really short breath, or when you said that word there, what was that? Being curious about their experience. And then you start to get to the fears, or the fears that have existed for a long time. The stories and narratives we've told ourselves that why we need to be the way we need to. I think that's where the magic starts to come, right? It's like, there's a story I've been telling, someone tells them, we have a conversation, they start to see there's a story they've been telling themselves about success. For instance, in my work, I work a lot with men around relationships and dating. So this success and relationship piece is often very intertwined for a lot of guys. Like, if I want a good relationship, or I want to meet a quote unquote good woman, then I need to be successful. And then we start to kind of unpick that. And so often it comes down to something they've seen in their childhood, something they experienced, some pain they don't want to have to live with again. They believe that, if they didn't make enough money, then they'd end up like their parents getting divorced or something like that. And then, like you said, you start to really work with that. You can work with the surface level, the doings, but it's just kind of shifting paper from place to place. But sometimes it does, like you say, create an opening to allow some more vulnerability to kind of come through. But because people often come to me in crisis, there's usually an emotional pain that we can be with. And something I'm noticing more and more now in my work with people is this idea of being with tension. This capacity to be with tension, to be with the tension of, oh, want to connect with my partner, but I don't really know how. And just staying with that feeling of what that is. Because usually I've noticed what we do as human beings, and I see this even in myself, is I'm feeling that tension. I don't like how it feels. I want to escape it. And the way I escape it is I disconnect from my partner, or I stop having the conversation, or, we run away from it. But just being with the tension has a magic of just dissipating. So in my sessions with my clients, often it's like, I'll be like, tell me about the tension. Tell me about it now. And they might try and be like, yeah, so what I think I need to do is like, no. We'll get there. Like, just stay with this, because there's a capacity in being with tension that we kind of need to cultivate in this area, just to do anything, not to do anything about it, but to create the, for want of a better phrase, outcome we desire. But we need to be able to stay with it, because otherwise we'll just keep doing the thing we've always done. Is like, we'll eject ourselves out of it. And that's what's created a lot of our kind of difficult situations in our lives, I find.
I think that's such a great point. It makes me think when you say about this tendency, maybe across the board, but especially with my work with men, to want to do, to want to perform. It's like, okay, cool. Just tell me what to do. Like, how should I act here, and how? But I know this in my own life as much as with clients, is when I'm asking that, or I'm creating some kind of new strategy, it's exactly what you said. Is because it's unbearable to stay in the tension. It's unbearable to stay in what for a lot of people is the childhood pain that comes up with disconnection, or comes up with the fear of enmeshment. And so we strategize around it to try and manipulate. I love the phrase, it's from the book No More Mr. Nice Guy, of covert contracts. And fuck me, was it something that called me out when I read it, right? And it's a beautiful way of not expressing our vulnerability. So this idea of, okay, if I can perform this way, if I make lots of money, then I'll get my need met. If I can be a really good listener, then I'll get my need met. If I can be really manly and masculine, then I'll get my need met. And what leads from that is resentment, because it doesn't work. And then I'm like, what the fuck? I've been exactly, well, not what you told me, but what I imagined you told me that I needed to be. And now you're not giving me the sex or the affection or the validation. And how dare you? But how scary is it to say to our partner, hey, I'm feeling kind of vulnerable today. Like, I would really appreciate closeness if you can. Or even the thought of that for me, right, years down the line, you're sat in this very tender place where there's a chance you could be rejected. There's a chance that you could not get your need met, which is fair. But it's also the only way that we can actually be authentic and real and deepen the relationship. So that tension idea, I think, is so true. And also our tendency to not sit with the tension and instead get the perfect plan that's going to get us back to what we want. But very rarely does it work.
It's just insulating us from the tension that we refuse, that we don't really want to feel. We're like creating scaffolding around it, but building a whole building around it with departments and all sorts of strategies and plans, just so we can kind of avoid having to go to that central place, which is like uncomfortable and difficult to be with.
Yeah, well, one of the parts that show up in me a lot is this part, I call him the actor, but he's a performance part. And he's not young, he's probably like teenagey, but he's always coming up with strategies to how to get closeness or how to get whatever he needs, be this type of person, be that type of person. And he's always protecting this much younger part of me that is really sensitive to moments of disconnection because he feels abandoned or he feels empty. And over the years, he still takes over sometimes, but often I'm like, I can listen to him. I'm like, that is a crazy idea. Or go away for 5 days, then someone will miss you. Or what about if you try and get, a tattoo on your face, that would look cool. Like, it's just, we can have some humor in the fact that we're not going to get rid of these strategies. And these strategies are always protecting something much more fragile. And I think the sweet spot, I've been thinking a lot, not to change the subject, but maybe it opens up about what the fuck it means to be a man. And there's so much about being stoic and there's so much about being vulnerable. But what I'm learning, I think, is that the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. It's, can I be vulnerable without collapsing and demanding that my partner meets my need? Can I say I'm feeling kind of tender today, like kind of unwanted? And I know that's my stuff and I'm working on it, but I just want to let you know where I'm at. It's very different to saying, you don't want me, like we're not being close enough at the moment. Like we should, that tender spot of being open but contained. And I don't know, what do you think about that? It's my emerging thought of the moment about masculinity.
Yeah, something I was thinking about over the weekend, because, this thing about masculinity and being a man is, I've spoken to, some really amazing minds about masculinity in my podcast. And there's like some people who are maybe over on one side that they are very much like, a man shouldn't be too vulnerable. He shouldn't be vulnerable. Like vulnerability to some degree is useful, but maybe preaching a more harder line version of masculinity that's still rooted in providing, protecting, procreating, and so forth, right? And I know when we hear those words, we often think of something toxic. Our first mind comes to something toxic. And I guess what I'm going to enter into that piece is like, that doesn't have to be that way. That can be done from a place of like love and care and service and all those sorts of things. And then over here, there's this other kind of piece of my masculinity, and I'm not saying it's only a continuum, it's also in my mind now, is of like being really emotionally open, really vulnerable with those in our lives. And I feel that what I heard you say, and this is going to come to what I'm saying, is like there's a courage in what you described there. Is courage, right? Is being vulnerable without demand, without hooks. Like, I'm going to be vulnerable, so you have to meet my need, right? Because that's kind of what almost a child does. I'm going to do this thing because I know this is going to push your buttons and force, and it's like a kind of immature way to go about things. Whereas I'm seeing and I'm feeling more at this moment, like yourself, it's like an emerging thought, an idea of like, oh no, it's courage. It's this space of, I'm going to open my shirt, right? And bare my heart to you, not because not in the aid of avoiding you stabbing me in the chest, because I'm going to accept that might happen. But I feel called to, because that's part of who I am and I'm okay with that. And I don't need to do that all the time, but I can talk about my experience of where I'm at, and I can stand up and do that courageously. And I think that courage is this really interesting ingredient for men, because if you ask men, like, do you want to be courageous? Men would be like, yeah, fuck yeah, I want to be courageous. We all kind of see these movies, these men are really courageous. But when it comes to, say, certain types of emotional vulnerability, or just not even just emotional vulnerability, whether that is building the business you want to build, or quitting the job you don't like, or going after the woman that you want, or going to see a therapist and talking about the childhood that's really hurt you. All of these things take courage. And that's not the thing that we put very front and center when we're talking about men's vulnerability, and also the range of what men's vulnerability can be. Because, I've been working with a group of men recently, and joy seems to be one of the most, joy and celebration in the group I'm running now seems to be the most vulnerable thing for them to do and share. The hardest thing for them to do is share joy and vulnerability. Sorry, joy and celebration. But that's not this emotional sadness and pain and so forth, but it's still vulnerable, because it still bears us to like open up and be open to ridicule, judgment, shame. So, but it all takes courage. It all takes a courage to step forward and do.
Yeah, I love that. I think the shadow is often made up of what we seem or imagine is actually quite positive traits. Confidence, like you said, celebration, joy, playfulness, all of these things also get kind of pushed away because they're not accepted. And there is this pushback of men being very vulnerable. But what I've learned kind of from being someone that went from completely cut off and self-contained to trying vulnerability at one point is like we are not being asked to spill our guts in a uncontained way that demands that our partner picks us up off the floor and fixes us, because the image that comes to mind then is we're one step away from my mother picking us up and giving us a cuddle. It's like there's a continuum of like being completely cut off, like I'm fine, nothing's wrong, to demanding that we are soothed in the moment. And that's actually really hard, because when we open, I know for me, when I open and say I'm feeling insecure or distant, my partner and me always joke, she's like, I've got 1 second to say the right thing before you close up or get defensive, because it's like I'm giving her something which she could so easily break and hurt me with. And so my work in that area is definitely to breathe and stay open, to offer my vulnerability as a gift that doesn't need anything in return. And that, I guess, is, yeah, that's what I'm working towards, and where I think vulnerability can fit in, because I don't think we should deny this kind of, I think you said provider or protector. I think these are beautifully adaptive roles that have been here forever, that they shouldn't be pathologized. And we shouldn't then suddenly switch and be like, well, this is now an excuse to me to just let out any emotion that comes to mind in an unprocessed way. There's a maturity of the integrated man. And I wish I could tell you that I had it sussed, but it's a process for me of just failing over and over again to like try and work something out in my own system. Luckily with a partner that's patient, but yeah. Yeah.
But I also think that's part of it, isn't it? That's part of the process of being an integrated man, being a mature man, of the willingness to try and fail, you know, the willingness to kind of go, I'm going to try something, and have the self-awareness to go, oh, I'm trying this thing. And afterwards kind of evaluating to some degree from a place of kind of as much objectivity as we can bring in, of like, oh, actually, that the reasons for me doing that thing weren't as pure as I thought they were in the moment. And then kind of owning that, going, oh, actually, I was opening up there and I wanted you to, you know, the example you gave was really beautiful of, you know, your partner saying she's got like 1 second to say the right thing, because it's so true, isn't it? We open for this moment and we almost set our partners up to fail, because it's like a little test we've given them, but we haven't prepped them for the test. They haven't told them how they can answer the test. And we're setting them up to fail, to kind of, not deliberately, consciously, deliberately, to reinforce our existing belief. But like, I guess the skill is opening enough and in consciousness of going, I'm going to do this because this is what I want to do. And then later on looking back at that and going, oh, actually, that wasn't really true to who I'm trying to be. And then clearing that up, taking ownership, the kind of, I guess it's accountability, isn't it? Because when we're kind of operating from a place of immaturity, I find we don't want to take accountability. We want to kind of point the finger at someone else as to blame for our hurt. Like, oh, you did this and that created this in me.
Of course. And it's so sneaky and subtle, because in the moment it feels so real. But yes, that process of just being courageous enough to risk doing something different, trying something new, taking accountability and ownership, and returning open-hearted. I think there's I think in The Superior Man, it talked about just stay open, like no matter what. And it's like, yeah, that's such a poetic piece of writing, but it's so hard when every childhood part of us is screaming and wanting to defend and separate and pull away. I mean, what would I rather do? A crazy, let's say, in inverted commas, masculine adventure that feels dangerous, I don't know, a crazy assault course, or to hear my partner criticize me and stay open? Like, that one's more fucking painful And I feel more of a man if I was able to stay open and hold that pain. There's nothing timid about the integrated man, because it's actually fucking frightening. It's much easier and more timid to be the arsehole or the nice guy, or continue with the roles, or disappear into work, because it feels safer. To stay open, to stay present, even when it hurts, that is a real trip. Yeah.
Mm. I often feel like as men, you kind of alluded to it there, I feel we're willing to do things with our bodies, right? Or to some degree of our minds, that are like, we'll go and sit inside some sort of 120-degree sauna for an hour. We'll like push ourselves like, I can do this, I can do this. But then given the opportunity to like, we'll push our bodies in ways and we'll risk our bodies in ways that can sometimes be ridiculous. But to risk our heart, to risk our emotional piece of us, like that's where we can really, we really don't want to put ourselves in that position at all.
Yeah. The question of how strong we are is not about how much we can lift at the gym, it's how much we can stay open in the storm. Can we hold our partner when maybe they're triggered and they're criticizing us in ways that don't really feel fair? Can we see through that in the moment to, I think again in The Superior Man, it talks about penetrate with love. Can we stay open and not close? That takes practice. And I don't think we've ever learned. I've never been taught to do that, There's a long way, I think, for us to go as men to show up. And I don't think it's to become wussy and timid and overly emotional. And I don't think it's to resort back to the safety of toxic masculinity. I think it's just about staying fucking open and feeling everything and holding it and being able to express what feels painful for us in a way. My last point on that, but before anything else, is I'm really passionate about it because I think I work as you do, and I think we spoke about this briefly with a lot of men, and they're petrified. Underneath it all, they're petrified. And that experience doesn't get amplified out to social media much. There are absolute idiots, and that's the most polite word I can use in men. But there's also a lot of people that are really struggling and saying, I don't know what to do to be a good man. I'm really trying and it hurts. And I think it's important to give voice to that as well.
Yeah, I experienced that with a lot of men. They don't know, they want to be good men. They don't know how, and they're looking for an answer. And I think that's a lot. I think that's probably 99% of men. They want to be good men. They don't know how. No one showed them. Like you said, we didn't grow up with role models that knew how to be good men, a lot of us. So they're looking for an answer, and they're finding their answer in not always the best places, right? They're hearing the person who shouts the loudest, who the algorithm brings more to their doorstep, for instance, and they're just looking for an answer of how I can be a good man, how I can be a successful man in the world. And it's a very difficult question to answer, because you could ask 100 different men and women, 100 different men and women, and they would give you 100 different answers. And, I've sat with young boys in classrooms, and the urge, many of them just want to be successful, financially successful especially, but they want to be good. They want to be good men. They're trying to be good men, and they're just looking for an answer. And no one has one. And for a 14-year-old boy who wants rules that he can follow and just do and act in, it's a very confusing world to be in, when it's like, well, you're telling me there's no answer, but this other person has an answer. I can't follow you in your non-answer because I'm trying, and that doesn't give me anywhere. And I think there's a lot of men and boys just searching for an answer of how to be a good man, and they can't. They're finding one they find.
I always think if an answer is too black and white, it's probably the wrong answer. But my God, is it intoxicating to have a rule book to life or something to follow, especially if it works in the short term. But yeah, to kind of go right back to the work I do, this kind of permeates through everything, this idea of being authentic, which is your word, right?
And there's no answer to it, I guess. If someone said, how do you, it's the same with authenticity, is how do you be authentic? You end up with another 100 different answers, because There's the like, oh, just following what feels true to you, follow your feelings and emotions. And that's a really inadequate answer to give to a man, because he's also feeling fear, inadequacy, worry, anger. And that's not really, because those feelings don't come from a place that are really authentic to us. There are, our wounds, the parts of us that are protecting us from, and so forth. And I think sometimes it's a lack of acknowledgement actually for men on the complexity of those answers. It's like, I see so often online, just be better. And it's like, well, actually, that's a very complex statement of just being better. Like, what is that? If I ask, like I said, 100 people, you get 100 different answers. And following our feelings isn't the answer, because that can lead us to anything from drinks and drugs to like pain and anger and violence even, because those feelings also are there. So it's just like this like very complex soup that, to the men listening, I really get it, because I'm a man and I've worked with a lot of men, and I'm sure David does. And just acknowledging that you're having this experience of complexity and not really always sure which direction to go in.
No, I think you said it perfectly. You hear it so often. Yeah, be authentic. And it's like, okay, I'll go talk to my partner. I'm feeling really inadequate and I hate myself, and I'm also really angry and I want to sleep with other people, and I also am really scared that you don't want to sleep with me. It's like, well, that didn't work out. So it's like, okay, you're completely right. It's like our wounds speak very loudly. So maybe there's something about authenticity which is getting underneath our wounds. And I think in a form of therapy like IFS, which I use a lot when I'm talking to these different parts, is beautiful, because if we start to see a part as a part, okay, there's this people pleasing part, okay, there's this really angry part, and we get to listen and talk to it. Even by that very process, there's a listener. So then we turn back and we're like, well, okay, well, if this is a part, what happens when this part steps back? And I think the more parts that step back, the more true we become. And I can do this in my own practice when I get it right, which I don't always, which is I might feel very angry and I have a conversation with that part, and that part tells me that it's protecting the feeling of rejection. And then I talk to that part and it tells me about when I was much older, much younger, that rejection felt so scary, and the only way I could get through it is to get angry, because then at least I'd feel like I had some power. And then I spend some time soothing that part and it starts to settle. And then I find myself in a place which is maybe the closest I'd get to an answer of being authentic, which I'm not clouded and activated by remnants of my past or strategies that I created when I'm a kid. I'm more present in the moment and seeing things as they are and responding almost purely from instinct in a loving way. So IFS, I think, is a wonderful way. If anyone listening hasn't come across it, there's a beautiful book called No Bad Parts. But that's been really helpful for me, just to move away the layers of kind of trauma and strategy-based personality into something more real. And I've always found with anyone, I think this is where the spiritual ties in, is we normally find a part that's quite caring and compassionate and considerate but assertive and open.
And that's the essence of the more essential part of who we are.
Yeah.
I often say, something I often think of, and especially now with my little boy and watching him grow, is, he's both very assertive in all the things he wants, but also very kind and very playful on all these things. And he's currently, pretty much unencumbered by all the stuff that gets put on us through life. And I think kids can be a really great mirror to what we would be like without all of that, without the wounds, the fears, the traumas that get built up, the personas and the masks that we have to carry, as a really beautiful way to start to understand how we would be as at our core in the world without all of that.
Yeah, and to add on to there, a word that I'm really loving at the moment, which I didn't really understand for a long time in my journey, is embodiment. You hear it, right? It's a bit of a buzzword sometimes, but I know for me, I'm very in my head. I can use my intellect to bypass things, and I can be very serious and very deep. But for many years, I lost this sense of my actual body and movement and play. What a vulnerable experience. And so I think sometimes authenticity can be found in those moments, those playful moments. I started jiu-jitsu maybe 6 months ago, and I'm sure you've spoken to some people that started, because everyone seems to be starting. But the best thing I've ever done in my life, and it reminded me, because you talked about your kid, and my kid's 5, and he wrestles by nature, right? He just rolls around, and I'm there on a Wednesday and Saturday at jiu-jitsu doing the same bloody thing. I'm not thinking, I'm just accessing something so real and so light-hearted in a sense, but also my kind of masculine aggression, but in a really beautiful kind of controlled way. I think that was only just to say play is really wonderful. And maybe to give a little push for jiu-jitsu, because I recommend it to fucking everyone now, because I think as a man, it's like both humbling and completely eye-opening.
It is this part of life at the moment is like everybody is doing jiu-jitsu. I went for a dinner a little while ago and there were 10 people on the table and I was one of 2 people that wasn't regularly, or I've never been to jiu-jitsu. Every man had said the same thing. It's this opportunity to like embody presence and just be and play, and in a way, and actually find that part of them, as one of the guys said, feel the part of them that's a killer, that would like to kill somebody, and just touch that part of them in a way that's contained, that has rules, and is honorable as well in the space.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's amazing. I'm rubbish at it, but it's amazing.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, David, the time is running away and I feel like we could hop from topic to topic very easily. And it's been really beautiful just to be in your presence, this kind of slow and gentle unfolding and allowing things to flow so naturally through a conversation. So I want to say a big thank you to you for today, for our conversation. And I imagine the listeners are wondering where they can find you, where they can find out about working with you and, yeah, your practice.
So very simple. The main place to find me is on Instagram, which is at David Sam Gibbs. The company or the department that I have is called 1504, but Instagram is the best place, and you can kind of be directed everywhere else from there. And yeah, just to echo, it's been lovely to have this conversation. That's kind of, you always come in right and it's false, and you're thinking about what you're saying, and now we've got to the end. It's just authentic. It's just real. So that's really special. It's nourishing.
Yeah, man. Thank you. And listeners, all the details will be in the show notes. You can just click on the little link, take you to David's Instagram and find out more of his beautiful writings as well. You know, there's some beautiful writing on his Instagram page and a few videos, but I must really direct you to the beautiful writings and ideas around, you know, everything from many of the things we talked about today, and purpose and meaning and suffering. I think they're really, really beautiful to check out. So listeners, as I often do, is say, you know, share this with somebody. There's probably someone in your life that you know who really could do with listening to this conversation. Maybe they're feeling low. Maybe they are struggling with overwhelm and stress of their work, of their life. And maybe just knowing that they are not alone. This is an experience that many of us are experiencing, could be really valuable. So I ask you just to pass that on to somebody, pass this episode on to somebody. And there's just all that's left for me to say is a big thank you for you listeners, for you supporting the podcast. I like to say that. I often forget to say a big thank you to you just for listening and getting this far. And thanking David again for his wonderful wisdom today. And I'll say ciao, ciao.